To close out our illustration unit, we're going to create a cookbook of illustrated recipes. Your task is to create some sort of visual documentation of how to create a recipe. Similar to how the internet has exploded with how-to videos of how to make something, this project should give you an opportunity to help out someone trying to make something simple by giving them visual and written directions. You are going to use a recipe of your choice to create a composition to illustrate the step-by-step instructions. Your composition is going to explore a purposeful use of color and text. So you are going to decide how this composition is going to look. Why are you doing it? So to continue with creating and generating ideas, to organize and develop your artistic ideas. We're going to do a lot of planning before we get to our final draft stage. So making sure that we are keeping track of all that we are doing, refining your artwork as you go throughout all the stages, and analyzing what your recipe should look like and what it ends up looking like at the end. For project success, I would recommend following these specific directions. Your first job is to find a recipe. You're going to locate the recipe that you want to illustrate. Here's a few things that you should keep in mind. Keep it short and sweet. You do not want to be creating a whole cookbook for someone on how to prepare the perfect Thanksgiving dinner. Think of comfort food, something that you like. How many steps does it take to make mac and cheese or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? The fewer ingredients and fewer steps you have to illustrate will help you in the long run be able to spend a lot of time on those specific items as you are drawing them. Then you are going to solely look at your ingredients list. For every ingredient that you have, you are going to create a visual drawing of what that is. So if you have peanut butter on your ingredient list for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I want to either see a tablespoon of peanut butter or maybe a jar of peanut butter, maybe a combination of those things. And then as you are sketching, I want you to decide what kind of style you want this illustration to be in. Do we want to go realistic, cartoony, graphic? What do you want? So here's just a few examples of a banana, right? This is all the same thing. We all know what bananas look like, but there are plenty of ways to illustrate them. You could go hyper realistic. You could choose to use watercolor paint for this project if you want and try and make them look as real as possible. You can make the world's cutest set of directions and give me a cartoon for each food that has some sort of character face on them. You could decide that you don't want to use color at all and just rely on your pen and ink abilities to create this banana. You are in control. Once we've created our ingredients drawings, that's going to help us figure out what our style needs to be. Then you're going to want to figure out, based off of that style, what your page composition should look like. This is going to be how your viewer sees the recipe and where you put your ingredients. So the things that you need to think about in your thumbnail drawing. Where is your title going? Where are the ingredients going? What kind of step-by-step instruction do you need? I'm not asking for you to come up with a drawing for everything at this stage. Here's an example of my 2 thumbnails that I came up with. I have one where I have my ingredients are going to be all on the side, and then kind of an easy to follow step-by-step process to make guacamole, and then guacamole will be up in the corner. Or my other option, I could have guacamole be in the center and have my ingredients kind of appear in the top corner in some sort of blob that makes them stand off the page, and then have my steps written out in a life cycle type fashion. So those are 2 ways that I could set up my ingredients. I could totally come up with more than 2 ways to do this, but all I'm requiring from you is 2 thumbnails. Once you've figured out your composition, we're going to move on to our rough draft. So you're going to get rough draft paper from me, and you will start drawing everything exactly how you want it to look. So your placement, the composition, the font that your title is in, what words you're going to use for your directions, what your pictures are going to look like, the style of them. All of that is going to be figured out in your rough draft. You are going to complete the rough draft using pencil only, but the rough draft paper is going to be the same size as your final draft paper, and it's going to end up looking as complete as possible without having any color. So here's an example of my rough draft. So I just have a nice pencil outline, but I've treated it like it is a final draft. So everything is exactly how I want it to look in the final. Once your rough draft is done, you're going to trace your composition over onto final draft paper. We've talked about the tracing table a lot in this room, but not many people have used it. So if you are ready to transfer to final paper during class time, you are going to use a tracing table or a window. And if you're doing it at home, a window is going to be your best bet to make sure that you have some sort of light source that is showing through the paper so that you can easily transfer your rough draft to your final paper. This is crucial to limit the stray pencil marks and erasing mishaps that happen while you're drawing with pencil. It's going to keep your paper nice and clean, and then you won't have to worry about things like adding a black background if you don't want to. Once your final draft is transferred over onto your final paper, you are going to design this however you want. So if you don't want to use color, you can use pen or Sharpie or pencil to add shading. You can use colored pencil, watercolor paint, markers, whatever you want to make sure that your directions are standing out. Clearly define the directions. Your job at this point is to make sure everything stands out. So you are in direct control of what materials you use to make that happen. And here is the example once again, so you can see what it looks like in its final form. The assignment is due on October 21st. You are going to have asynchronous and synchronous time to work on these.